Large scale Clone Wars sets are back with the LEGO Star Wars Coruscant Guard Gunship. This is set 75354 and is a set that people have been very much waiting for, but not quite in the form you'd expect. Now, if you're thinking about buying this for yourself, it's gonna set you back 180 US dollars, 270 Australian, and 130 Great British pounds. And while it might be a large scale Clone Wars set, like a lot of recent Star Wars models, it is a much scaled down version compared to its previous counterparts. And overall, aesthetic wise, this set is amazing. Playset wise though, it's lacking in a couple of areas. Starting off with the 5 minifigures though, first up we have Chancellor Palpatine, who comes complete with this beautiful dress piece this time around. His printing is amazing and goes all the way down onto that dress piece on both the front and back, and he also comes with a brand new hairpiece and face print compared to his older versions. I've been wanting a prequel / Clone Wars Palpatine for a really long time, so this minifigure is a very welcome addition. Next up is Padme Amidala, who despite having a ton of costume options is a very rare minifigure to get in LEGO Star Wars sets. She's definitely the minifigure that I wanted most though out of this set because I just absolutely love Padme, and overall, again, I really like her design. The only thing that I wish that she had was dual molded legs, utilizing the dual molded kind of dark tan and reddish brown legs. Next up is Commander Fox, and overall he's again a really welcome addition into this set for me. However, I feel like just the quality of this minifigure overall is really not that great. Firstly, having the waist capes printed on the legs is incredibly frustrating as someone who really likes to have a little bit more detail on their minifigures. It's fantastic for play, but it really does sacrifice the minifigure's look overall and really makes the minifigure feel a lot cheaper. Secondly is the torso, where LEGO I feel like really needed to do a second layer on this white print. The white overall just feels incredibly transparent and does have a pink tone to it and just feels incredibly weak. On the belt, it's not quite as noticeable, but that chest print especially does not look that great. The helmet for the most part is really good, however the stripe on his fin looks really small, especially when you compare it to the Shock Troopers, where it just fills out the mold a little bit better. Overall, the minifigure is okay. I mean, I'm glad to have him in my collection, but there is definitely a lot that could have been done in order to make him look way better. And lastly, you get 2 Coruscant Guard Shock Troopers, and I really like these guys. The torso and leg printing is fantastic, and they both have the brand new clone head, and also they come with the brand new style of clone helmet, which definitely isn't my favorite just because of how bulky it is, but overall they do look fine. There's nothing particularly wrong with them. However, at least for my collection, I did order replacement helmets to swap out on mine in the future. That being said, they are consistent with the new wave of clone troopers, so if you're a recent fan, they will match yours. Overall, the minifigure selection is really solid. It's definitely not the best out of all of the Star Wars sets. However, at least for me and my collection, every single figure here, at least in their version or variant, is completely brand new, which makes me really happy. Now let's talk about the gunship. My first impressions with this set is that it is incredibly small, but incredibly cute. I really like the scale of it. It's definitely smaller than minifigure scale, which I'm a big minifigure scale fan, so that is a little bit frustrating, but the design overall feels really clean. It's very refined and definitely shrunk down, which is not my favorite thing in the world, but that does also mean it's gonna fit easier on your shelf, and with the awkward size of a gunship, that's a really good thing. On the flip side though, it did mean that LEGO made quite a lot of sacrifices in order to make this set. The first thing to go though was the domes on the wings, which were just replaced with some brick-built turrets, including some stud shooters, which is fun and it looks fine, but it's definitely not as good. I would have loved to have seen those round dome clear pieces pop up. I think that would have been perfect, rather than just having these gray bricks placed here. Other than that, the wings are amazing, and I love how much of it is tiled off and really smooth as well. There aren't any stickers on here, which is a very nice welcome change in comparison to some of the older models, and they blend in really nicely with the giant turrets on the top. This whole section as well is incredibly secure, but can also be taken apart relatively easily in case you need to transport it, or even if you just want to have it on display and take one of the wings off in order for it to fit on your shelf a little bit better. At the back there is this tiny little Technic cannon, as well as this little hatch that can open up, which there's nothing back there, and it's kind of hard to like put a minifigure back there or just store anything in general, but it is a pretty neat feature that it could still open up, I think. It's decorated with a little Republic logo in the bottom left hand corner, which is pretty neat, and just like the wings, is really nicely tiled off. Also at the back there's 2 tiny cabinets if you wanted to store the leftover studs from the stud shooters, or even some of the characters' weapons if they would fit, but I don't really know if they have much purpose otherwise. One of my favorite things about this model though is how they did the doors. They completely close and look really flush and can open up really nice and easy, and just like a lot of other models of the gunships, you can't move it back too much in order to access the entire interior. However, when they're closed, it looks incredibly clean. For a troop carrier, there's not much area to carry troops though, which is a little bit of a shame considering with my last gunship I filled up the entire thing with phase 1 clones. I can't necessarily do the same thing here, but for the most part this is just gonna sit closed up on my shelf anyway. There's also 2 more hatches at the front on either side, which are incredibly difficult to open and really do not give you much space at all. Just due to how this set was built, you cannot hinge these doors up, you cannot get anything in here, and it really just feels like there is a major waste of space on the interior of this front section, which is a real shame just given how little space there actually was for the troops in the main portion. It's really weird because it feels like there is a ton of interior space, but at the same time it feels like you barely got anything. However, like the rest of the model, the exterior is done very nicely. There is a giant Republic logo sticker there and a bunch of little tiles in order to represent windows, and just the whole thing, much like the rest of the set, is nicely tiled off with very few studs exposed on the sides. And despite a ton of angles too, everything fits really flush with the body of the gunship, which when it comes to the cockpit section is incredibly impressive. There's space for you to put the 2 Coruscant shock troopers as well if you just open up the little canopies, and you can attach them down to the bottom where there are a couple of studs so that the minifigures will feel secure, but they're not attached in there too hard so that you can still get them out super easily. At the very front too, you have those iconic gunship turrets at the front, which are done in a light bluish gray, and then last but certainly not least is an amazing play feature which is brought back from the last gunship, and that is the carry handle. This whole thing is built out of Technic and there's a little hook on the end, so it feels a lot more easier and more comfortable to hold, which given how back heavy this gunship is, I feel like is incredibly necessary just so that this entire thing doesn't slip out of your hand. I love this play feature so much because not only can you swing it around and play with it, it just makes transporting it so much easier in general, and considering how robust it is too, I feel like you could swing this pretty violently and still have the entire ship intact. If the lack of space with this set doesn't bother you, you're probably going to really enjoy this, which is kind of how I feel. The space is a little bit frustrating, but since I display my sets rather than playing with them, it's not something that I'm necessarily going to notice in the long term. I can fit pilots in the cockpit and that's really enough for me. Honestly, just the bigger issue is having the turrets on the side be brick built and not domes. I just don't think it looks quite as accurate, which is personally what I care about most with my LEGO Star Wars sets. Outside of that, the price does hurt when it comes to the scale. I feel like just looking at this and the AT-AT from last year, I think the AT-AT felt like it had a little bit more value simply because it had size and it had a little bit more of an interior, even though it wasn't that much greater than this one. However, purely from an aesthetic and display point of view, I think this set wins by miles. This set is a nice switch up and offers quite a lot of variety in the overall LEGO Star Wars line. However, I really hope that they do revisit the gunship with that more classic Episode 2 Republic color scheme in the near future. But let me know what you're thinking about this set in the comments down below, and until next time, I'll see you later.